video, we're going to be looking at something called lowest common multiple. And you might see that sometimes abbreviated as LCM for lowest common multiple, just using those three letters. So what I have here, 3 times 7 equals 21. Actually, this is an example of a lowest common multiple. We would say 21 is the lowest common multiple of 3 and 7. Now, when we're looking at doing something like this, just as to keep in mind, if I write 3 times 7, 3 and 7 are both what we would call factors. They are two things that are multiplying together. Okay, so both the 3 and the 7 are factors. And because when I take this factor of 3 and I multiply it by the 7, I get the 21, I would say that 3 is a factor of 21. I can also say the same thing about 7. 7 is a factor of 21. When we look at the 21, we call the 21 our product. And the product is really just the answer to a multiplication statement. Now, because when I take the 3 and the 7, when we multiply those two factors together, this answer of 21, it means it is a multiple, oh, that M didn't work, multiple of 3, and it's also a multiple of 7. It's a multiple of both of those numbers because I can multiply 3 by something to turn it into 21. And I can multiply 7 by something to turn it into 21. So 21 is a multiple of 3, and 21 is a multiple of 7. Okay, we'll dig into that a little bit more. Just some vocabulary that I'm going to hit you. So multiples. When we talk about a multiple is the product of a known number and a whole number. Okay, so let's say my multiples I want to look at for my known number, we'll say we're looking at multiples of 4. So if I start off with 4, I'm going to multiply 4 by 1. And when I go 4 times 1, we get 4. So 4 is a multiple of 4. That makes sense. Okay, any number is a multiple of itself. But I could do it again, and instead of multiplying by 1, I could multiply by 2. And if I go 4 times 2, I now get that 8 is a multiple of 4. So 8 is a multiple of 4. And I could keep going. If I stick with that known number of 4 and I keep multiplying by all my numbers in order, I get my next multiple, which is 12. So 12 is also a multiple of 4. Really, another way that I'm doing this is just skip counting by 4s, right? My first multiple of 4 is 4. My second multiple of 4 is 8. My second or third multiple of 4 is 12. And if I keep counting by 4s, the next one I would get is 16, and then 20, and then 24. And it could keep going on and on and on and on and on. Okay? Reminder, if we ever talk about the word product, the product is the answer to a multiplication question. So all of these up here, when I had 4 times 1 and I said my answer is 4, this 4 is a product because it was the answer to our multiplication statement. This 8 was a product because it was the answer to a multiplication statement. Okay? So those are multiples. And what we really want to find is what we call the lowest common multiple. The reason we're interested in the lowest common multiple is there's often lots of different multiples that would work out for both numbers. So if I was to look at this example that I gave you at the very beginning, I have 3 times 7, and that gives us 21. And how do I find out that that's actually the lowest common multiple? Well, I would start off with my value of 3. And what I want to do is I want to list all of the different values for 3. So if I start counting by 3s, it would be 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, and I'm going to keep going farther than I need to, but 24, 27, 30, 33, Well, I hope I have enough room. 36, 39, and 42. Barely enough space. That's my first value that I'm looking at. I find all the multiples of 3. Now there are more multiples of 3, but I don't want to keep writing them out forever. Plus I've run out of space on the tablet, so I can't write any more. I'm also going to look at this value of 7, and I'm going to count by 7s and find my multiples of 7. So as I count by 7s, it's 7, 14, 21, I can't see that one very good. I'll try and fix that. 21, 28, 35, 42, 49, 56. I could keep going, but that's probably enough multiples of 7. So I have lots of multiples for 3. I have lots of multiples of 7. But what I want to know about is the things that are common between 3 and 7. What are the things that are the same between 3 and 7? So as I look through my list, I've got a 3 here, but I don't have a 3 in my list for 7. So 3 doesn't work, and 6 doesn't work. And none of these work until I hit 21. 21 is a common multiple because it shows up in both of my lists. I have another common multiple too. I also have the number 42. That shows up in both of my lists as well. So there are lots of different common multiples. If I kept writing all these numbers, I would also find one at 63 and 84 and 105. There's lots of common multiples. Well, I don't want to find so many of them. In fact, as we keep going, our numbers get so big, we don't really want to deal with them. So we are always concerned with, well, what's the first time that they match? What is the lowest number where they match? And that's the one we focus on. So when we want to find lowest common multiple, we count by each of those numbers, writing out our lists, and then the first number that matches for both is our lowest common multiple. So let's try some. What if I wanted to find the lowest common multiple of 4 and 5? So I'm going to start off with 4. I'm going to make a list of all the multiples for 4. And then I'm going to do a list where I find multiples of 5. When I count multiples of 4, it's like counting by 4s. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. But really, I'm just adding 4 every time. So I've got 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, and I could keep going. And maybe we'll have to. Then I'm going to start looking at multiples of 5. When I look at multiples of 5, it's like counting by 5s. 5, 10, 15, 20, and at that point, I should stop. Yes, there are more numbers if I keep counting by 5, but I have a match in both of our lists. So even though there are more numbers, more multiples of 5, I have found a match. And I want to find the smallest match possible, because we don't want to keep counting and writing forever. So we would say the lowest common multiple, or the LCM, of 4 and 5 is 20. That's not so bad. Count by each number, write out the multiples until you find a matching multiple. What about the lowest common multiple of 3 and 8? Let's see. We'll start off with 3. I'm going to count by some 3s here. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. And if you're finding it difficult to count by that number, you also have your multiplication chart. And when you look at your multiplication chart for 3, when you go across your row, you're going to see all these same numbers. And then I could look at my multiplication chart for 8. And here's the first 3 numbers I'm going to see. I'm going to see 8, I'm going to see 16, and then I'll see 24. And I'm going to stop because even though my next number would be 32, I have a match at 24. Because I have a match, That is a common multiple. I can multiply 3 by something to turn it into 24, and I can multiply 8 by something to turn it into 24. That means 24 is that common multiple for 3 and 8. So my lowest common multiple for 3 and 8 is 24. Now you might have noticed on this example, my lowest common multiple ended up just being 3 times 8, right? On our last one, our lowest common multiple ended up just being 4 times 5 is 20. So does it always work like that? What if I was trying to find the lowest common multiple for 4 and 6? I could just go 4 times 6 and get 24. I have a common multiple at 24. But remember, I said we are curious about the lowest common multiple. So I have to see, is there one before that? If I count by 4s, I go 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and I'll write 24 because I know I'm going to have a common multiple at 24. But when I look at my 6s, we go 6, 12, 18, 24. Yes, we have a common multiple at 24, but we have one earlier than that, at 12. So just because I can multiply the two numbers together to find a common multiple, like I did here, I want the lowest common multiple. And so that means there could be something before that. In this case, our lowest common multiple for 4 and 6 is going to be 12, because it happens before we get to that 24. So remember, when you're looking for lowest common multiple, you want the smallest possible match. There could be lots of matches. These guys match at 12, they match at 24. If we kept going, they would also match at 36 and 48 and 60. But we want the smallest one. Otherwise, we're going to keep counting for way too long.